On the morning of June 12th, 1962, a guard at Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary reached through the bars for a routine head count, and a head rolled off the pillow into his hand. Guards discovered 3 inmates had escaped from the prison and launched themselves into the dark waters of San Francisco Bay. Authorities launched one of the largest manhunts in American history and searched for weeks, but found nothing.
It has been exactly 50 years since 3 men pulled off perhaps the most audacious prison break in history, escaping like Houdini from Alcatraz, never to be seen again.
For 55 years, the case stayed unsolved. Then a photograph surfaced. 2 men on a dusty road in Brazil, faces half hidden behind dark sunglasses. For years, no one could say who they were, and then in 2020, a machine could. The Rock. Alcatraz opened in 1934 on a wind-scoured island in the middle of San Francisco Bay. It was built for the men no ordinary prison could hold. Think Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly. But the steel bars were never the real cage. The cage was the water. It was bone-chilling, and more than a mile of it in every direction around the prison. Alcatraz was supposed to be unbreakable, and for 29 years it was. 36 men tried to escape in 14 separate attempts. Most were caught or shot, 2 drowned, and 5 simply vanished. The water was the fiercest jailer that the prison had. It always got the credit. Despite every failed attempt before him, Frank Morris was determined to break out. Orphaned at 11, he carried a measured IQ of 133, and he had already broken out of the Louisiana State Penitentiary once before. He was joined by 2 brothers, John and Clarence Anglin. They were bank robbers, 2 of 14 children from a dirt-poor farming family, raised swimming the rough current-heavy waters of the Gulf of Mexico. To them, a cold bay was not a wall or a fierce jailer. It was just another day from their childhood. A 4th man, Alan West, helped them plan it all. And what these men built over the next year would not just fool the night guards, it would fool history itself. The night. Over months, working after lights out, they widened the ventilation holes at the backs of their cells using spoons sharpened on concrete and a drill built from a stolen vacuum cleaner motor. Morris covered the scraping with his evening accordion practice. They sculpted lifelike heads using real human hair swept from the prison barbershop floor, flesh-tone paint, packed paper, and paste. Then they tucked them into their beds so the guards would count 3 sleeping men. From more than 50 stolen raincoats, they hand-stitched a raft and life vests, sealing the seams with contact cement. On the night of June 11th, 1962, Morris and the Anglins squeezed through the walls and climbed to the roof. Alan West's hole was not quite wide enough. By the time he finally broke through, the others were already gone. He helped plan the escape, but in the end, he became surplus to it. They inflated the raft with a small accordion turned into a makeshift pump and pushed off into the black water. Then, 7:15 the next morning, a guard reached through the bars for a head count, and a head rolled off the pillow into his hand. Imagine the horror that guard must have felt, but the horrors had just begun. The drowning verdict. The dummy heads were exposed, and the largest manhunt the region had ever seen was underway. Searchers found a waterproofed wallet, carrying the Anglins' contact photographs, names, addresses, faces of people they knew. They never found a single body. In 1979, the FBI closed the case with an official verdict. Morris and the Anglins drowned within minutes, swept out by the tide. It was a tidy verdict, and it protected the legend of the inescapable Rock. And from the very first day, much of the public never believed a word of it. They were right not to. The Bay was not the instant death sentence the government described. In 1955, fitness icon Jack LaLanne swam from Alcatraz to the mainland in handcuffs at the age of 41. He did it again at 60, this time shackled and towing a 1,000-pound boat. Today, thousands of people cross those same waters every year in the Escape from Alcatraz triathlon. In 2006, a 7-year-old made the swim. So, could 3 desperate, motivated men, 2 of them raised in open water, have survived it? In 2014, a team of scientists set out to settle the question for good by rebuilding that exact night inside a computer. What their simulation showed turned the official story upside down. The 30-minute window. At Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands, coastal scientists Olivier Hoes, Rolf Hoot, and Fedor Bart were modeling San Francisco Bay for a study on rising sea levels. Using a high-resolution hydraulic simulation, they wound the clock back to 1962 and released 50 digital rafts from Alcatraz at half-hour intervals. The results were brutal and precise. A raft launched any earlier than 11:30 was dragged straight out through the Golden Gate and into the open Pacific, and that meant certain death. But a raft launched between 11:30 and midnight rode the outgoing tide northward and washed up near Horseshoe Bay, just past the bridge. The escapees' survival came down to roughly half an hour. So, did they make that window? Then came the finding that made investigators go quiet. The model showed that debris from a Horseshoe Bay landing would drift back toward exactly one place: Angel Island, the precise spot where the FBI had found the raft fragments and the family photographs.
Paddle-like pieces of wood and one of the life vests washed up near Angel Island.
In other words, the very evidence used to argue the men drowned is exactly what proved they had lived. And the escapees may not have been guessing about the tides at all. Boston crime boss James Whitey Bulger served time on Alcatraz alongside the Anglins. Years later, he wrote to their family. He claimed he had personally taught the brothers how to read the bay's currents and that they had, in his words, done exactly what he told them to do. There are claims that the men never had to paddle far at all, that an accomplice slipped out to meet them in the dark with a boat. No such boat was ever found. But then again, neither was a body. The water did not kill them, which left investigators chasing 3 ghosts across an entire continent. And then, one of them wrote back, the letter and the ghosts. For decades, the Anglin family swore the brothers were alive, and they had their reasons. For the first 3 years after the escape, Christmas cards signed by John and Clarence arrived at their mother's home, carrying no postmark, as though hand-delivered. Anonymous roses appeared every single year, until she died in 1973. At her funeral, the family swore that 2 unusually tall men stood at the back, faces caked in heavy makeup. In 1989, one of the brothers watched 2 strangers appear at their father's burial, weep over the body, and leave without a word. Then, in 2013, a letter arrived at the San Francisco Police Department's Richmond Station. It was signed John Anglin. Yes, it read, we all made it that night, but barely. The writer claimed Frank Morris had died in 2008 and Clarence in 2011. He said he himself was 83 and dying of cancer, and that he would surrender for medical treatment and 1 year behind bars, but only if the police announced the deal on television. They never did. U.S. Marshal Donald O'Keefe confirmed that the FBI laboratory compared the handwriting of all 3 escapees against the letter. The result came back inconclusive. Same for the fingerprints and the DNA evidence. The trail went cold not because the letter was disproven, but because nothing about it could be proven at all. What investigators truly needed was a face, and one had been sitting inside a family photo album for more than 20 years. It had been taken on a dirt road in Brazil, and the 2 men in it were wearing sunglasses dark enough to hide everything. The photograph and the machine. The photo was taken around 1975 by Fred Brizzi, a man who had grown up with the Anglins near Tampa. He claimed he ran into the brothers in Brazil more than a decade after they were declared dead. He handed the picture to the family in 1992. In 2015, the brothers' nephews carried it to retired U.S. Marshal Art Roderick, who had chased this case for 20 years. He saw the picture as a complete game changer. The forensic expert he consulted called a match highly likely. But the deputy marshal, who also ran the case for years, Michael Dyke, saw things differently. He said the brothers' physical measurements indicated these were not the Anglins at all. It left the case in the same standoff. The picture was old and grainy, and both men wore thick aviator sunglasses, concealing the very eyes that facial recognition systems depend on. So in 2020, the Irish creative agency Rothko, part of Accenture Interactive, partnered with the machine learning firm Iden TV. Their neural network had studied millions of faces. It did not need the eyes. It mapped the bone structure, weight, age, and disguise, and built what they called a facial fingerprint, then matched it against the Anglins' verified prison photographs. The result came back positive. The The system identified both men, independently, inside the same frame. The odds of two unrelated strangers, each separately matching a different Anglin brother, collapsed towards 0. But the mystery isn't quite resolved yet. Rothko and Aiden TV were running a creative campaign, not a court forensic test. But their methodology was real, and so was the result. The FBI has never accepted the result. Even the people who ran it admitted that, short of digging up DNA, a sliver of doubt will always remain. But look at what that result is sitting on top of. A title model that hands the men a real path to shore, bodies that never washed up, a letter the FBI could not break, Christmas cards with no postmark, and now Two-Face's AI ties to the brothers. No single piece is proof, but stacked together. They make drowning the hardest version to believe. And still, the government won't say it out loud. It keeps one last door open, and that door finally closes. The open warrant. To this day, the U.S. Marshal Service keeps the warrants for Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin active. By the Marshal's own rule, they hunt a fugitive until he is arrested, confirmed dead, or turns 100 years old. And that clock is finally running out. On September 1st, 2026, Frank Morris turns 100, and by that rule, his warrant quietly dies with the birthday. One by one, the others will follow, the last of them expiring in 2031. After more than 60 years, the most famous manhunt in American history will simply end. This is not because justice was served or the case was solved, but because the law itself runs out of time. So, look one more time at that photograph. Two men on a dusty road, squinting into a Brazilian sun, free. If the machine is right, these are the same two farm boys who walked out of the inescapable prison and never came back. And maybe that freedom cost them everything. Whitey Bulger believed it did. When you disappear, the family, you have to cut all ties, Bulger warned. If the Anglin brothers truly made it, they bought their freedom with their mother's funeral, their father's grave, and every face they had ever loved. They won. And winning meant never going home again. Or maybe you believe the Bay took all three that night, and the no postmark Christmas cards, the letter, and the photograph are nothing more than the story a grieving family needed to be true. That is the part we can't decide for you. So, what do you believe? Did Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers die in the water on the night of June 11th, 1962? Or did three men with sharpened spoons and a raincoat raft pull off the only successful escape in Alcatraz history and grow old, free, somewhere far from home?